Hi, we are Group 11 and we are doing our presentation on Chapter 17, which is about traditional arts of Asia. We are going to start with India. Harappa was an ancient city along the Indus Valley that had a very advanced city planning and a lot of art. It was an active city 3,000 through 5,000 years ago. This Indus Valley civilization declined in 1800 BCE. The Indian subcontinent was invaded by nomadic Aryan tribes in 1500 BCE, and as a result, the Indian civilization was greatly influenced by the social structure, beliefs, and gods of these tribes. Three main beliefs were written in Aryan literature, Vedas and Upanishads. They are that there are repeated cycles of creation and destruction, that people are reincarnated after they die, and that there is only one supreme form of wisdom. Siddhartha Gautama, also known as the Enlightened One or Buddha, founded Buddhism. After reaching enlightenment, he founded the Four Noble Truths. The first one is that existence is full of suffering. The second one is that the cause of suffering is desire. The third is that if one wishes to eliminate suffering, one must first eliminate desire. Finally, the fourth and final noble truth is that if one wishes to eliminate desire, one must follow the moral code of the Eightfold Path, which regulates speech, thought, and action. Another idea that Gautama claimed is that if you achieve enlightenment, you will experience nirvana, also known as the final rebirth. Buddhist art appeared in 300 BCE, and during the developing years of Indian art, this Buddhist art dominated. The stupa is a type of Buddhist art that later developed into pagodas. Stupas are large dome-like structures and are based on burial grounds with relics buried in the middle. The Gandhara region was formed when Alexander the Great invaded in the 4th century BCE. In this region, Buddhist sculptors were able to create their own style. This style exhibits the fusion of the East and West that occurred when Alexander the Great invaded. A common subject in this art are bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas are people who are about to be enlightened but prefer to stay on earth and teach others. In art, bodhisattvas are shown with opulent jewelry and clothing. The Indian Gupta dynasty was active from 320 through 540. This dynasty combined Gandhara naturalism with the Indian ways of seeing. This is known as the Gupta style. Standing Buddha, the artwork we chose to analyze in this presentation, is an example of Gupta style. Hinduism has three principal goals. They are that Brahma is the creator of all things, Vishnu is the sustainer, and that Shiva is the destroyer. These gods work to help continue the evolution of the cosmos and to keep the balance of good and evil in check. A Hindu temple has two parts. There is a porch where the worshipper is prepped and purified, and a womb chamber, also known as Garbhagriha, where the image of the god is kept. Hindu art is characterized by movement, fullness, and rounded forms. Indian art was influenced by Muslim art when Islamic Mughal rulers conquered India in the 16th century. This art tended to show desire for union with God with erotic needs. Next, we're going to talk about Southeast Asia. The Bronze Age began in Southeast Asia around 800 BCE when metal was first imported. Although Southeast Asian art is mainly Buddhist, there are also elements of Hinduism. Later monuments combine the two religions' motifs, gods and figures. This is a statue of the Borobudur from 800 CE in Indonesia. It is an elaborate version of an Indian stupa. The corridors of the Borobudur are sculpted with images to tell stories that duplicate the journey to enlightenment. This particular statue most likely depicts the life of Buddha. Now we're going to talk about China. Chinese civilization is characterized by three traditions: Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. Prior to these traditions, China produced cast bronze objects during the Shang dynasty. The Tao Tai mask seems to be a recurring image on many Chinese bronze vessels. The Tao Tai mask is a composite monster with wings, claws, and horns whose meaning remains unknown. The vessels were used in rituals in honor of ancestors. The Chinese believed one's ancestors lived eternally in the spiritual realm and where they can influence worldly affairs. Eventually, this belief became a foundation for Confucianism, developed by Confucius. Confucianism centered around innovation and respect for tradition. During the Han Dynasty, the artwork was preserved in tombs. For example, the Wu family shrine includes illustrations that are simple yet energetic. This animation of the inner life force is known as qi. The concept of qi comes from the Taoist belief that the best life is one of harmony with the force that animates all created beings. Achieving said harmony would guarantee immortality. Traditional Chinese painting places emphasis on calligraphy and landscape. Calligraphy was a symbol of status and allowed artists to elevate their paintings by using brush techniques for expressive purposes. With the Mongol invasion in 1125, the Song Dynasty court and art academy was relocated to southern Asia. This relocation affected the Song art greatly. While the northern Song art was monumental and philosophical, it then became intimate and personal, emphasizing poetic views in smaller landscapes. During the Yuan dynasty from 1279 to 1369, artists went against government requests and started to devote themselves to the life of art and poetry, creating a new style known as literati painting. Bamboo became a familiar symbol for the movement and within its art. Just as bamboo bends without breaking, so must the creative artists in foreign-controlled China. Artists began to follow the basic Confucian concept of respect for the past by copying earlier artists, or artists began to evolve innovations. Chinese artists were the first to develop the porcelain pottery with blue decoration that we now know as China. Koreans also developed their own art techniques with sutras, a book of Buddhist teachings with illustrations of fine strands of gold and silver. After the Yuan dynasty, artists continued to copy earlier artists and innovate. However, one literati artist, Bada Shaoren, broke from tradition and paved the way for modern experiments in Chinese painting. Now we're going to talk about Japan. Japanese art, architecture, and design throughout history has been characterized by the alternating styles of Japanese nationalism and borrowed foreign styles. Many of the styles, especially in the early art, whether Japanese or foreign influence, are religiously based. The Japanese culture seems to have traditionally drawn their ideals of beauty from religion. The indigenous religion of China, called Shinto, is an ancient religion in which ancestors are worshipped and nature is considered sacred and holy. In Aichi, Japan, there are Shinto shrines that are exactly rebuilt every 20 years. They embody the traditional Japanese forms with their sculptural proportions, spatial harmonies, and precise craftsmanship. Chinese styles have also been particularly influential in Japanese culture since the 7th century, when the Japanese emperor sent people to China to study Chinese culture. As a result, Buddhism was adopted as the official religion of China. The Buddhist complex of Horhugi is an excellent example of both the Chinese and Japanese architectural style of the late 7th century. During the Kamakura period in Japan from 1185 through 1333, the trend in art was towards realism. Hand scrolls were a very popular form of art during this period and often featured portrayals of dramatic events that happened over the course of time, much as a film or television show would today. Zen Buddhism was another Chinese influence that came to Japan in the 13th century. Spontaneity and intuition are characteristic of the Zen influence on Japanese art and writings. Sessue was a Zen Buddhist priest who developed a simplified abstract style of ink painting that was adapted from the Chinese style. It was called haboku, which means flung ink. Another popular art form in Japan were the traditional Japanese folding screens that were used to separate rooms. Artists often use traditional Japanese forms like the spatial properties and repetitive patterns, as well as traditional subject matter like the Shinto shrines for these screens. In the mid-17th century, the woodcut printing technique was adapted from Chinese culture and made into a popular art form. Prints were called ukiyo-e, which means pictures of a floating world. They often depicted images from daily life such as portraits of actors, entertainments, and landscapes. In the same way that Japanese art forms have been impacted by other cultures, Japanese art and architecture has also influenced art, design, and architecture in the Western world. For example, modern architecture has drawn on Japan's ideas of simplicity and spatial flow. We're going to talk about the piece of art that we picked for our presentation. So we picked Standing Buddha, which was created in the 17th century. It's a sculpture made out of red sandstone, and it is very large. It has a height of 5 feet 3 inches. So for our initial reaction, we said that the statue is calming with its fluid lines and shapes, and that it has very intricate designs, which you can see on the robe and on the face and the hair. For our description, we said that Standing Buddha was created with sandstone sometime in the 5th century in India. He's 5 foot 3 inches tall and can presently be found in the Indian Museum in Calcutta. The large statue is wearing a monk's robe. He has his eyes closed and has a very peaceful expression on his face to show that he is in meditation. He stands in front of a mandala, a spiritual symbol in Buddhism and Hinduism that represents the universe and balance within it. The statue contains soft, rounded forms to exemplify the relaxed style. For our formal characterization, we said that the statue embodies a relaxed mood due to its symbolic spiritual meaning and that the curved lines and rounded shapes that make it. The viewer initially focuses on the head of the statue, which is surrounded by the large mandala. The face is in a state of meditation. and the lines on the rib cause the viewer's vision to travel down the statue. For the historical and cultural context, we see that standing Buddha is a prime example of Gupta style from India. He has long earlobes to indicate that he was a rich prince in a past life who had the money to buy and wear earrings. Viewers can also see that the standing Buddha was enlightened based on the top knot on his head. The fact that he is shown in meditation contrasts with Western depictions of Christ as active beings. This relaxed style eventually traveled with Buddhism spread to China and Southeast Asia. For our interpretation, we said that the statue seems to represent a balance between spirit and body. The round shapes and calm face seem to represent peace within, or enlightenment. If one were to replace the Buddha in sculpture, one might feel completely released of all earthly worries and sublime with peace. For our evaluation using one or more of the aesthetic theories, we said that the statue is well made from an expressionistic viewpoint as it elicits a sense of relaxation and meditation. Sculpture is also very intricate and shows a high degree of technical skill based on the early time period. The piece expresses the Buddhist concept of spiritual enlightenment and its importance as the foundation of the Buddhist religion. Overall, the statue is visually satisfying and absent of harsh lines and shapes. It is a very successful piece of art, and thank you for listening to our presentation.